With the pervasiveness of social media, it seems that everyone at some point asks me how to do this. Often you get bored with the same headshot or just a photo for your avatar for your social channels, whether it be Facebook or Twitter or LinkedIn. So here's a very neat technique to use the filter gallery to turn yourself into a cartoon avatar. Under the filter menu, before I run filter gallery, I prefer to do convert for smart filters. That way, if I want to adjust the settings, I could come back in and edit their values. So I'm going to click OK on this message, and I'll name this layer Shades. Now I can choose Filter, Filter Gallery. And I'll just scoot this over so I can focus on her. The filter gallery has a wide collection of artistic effects that you can apply, and you could see each of them by hitting their expand triangle. There are two that we're going to use to create a cartoon-like look. The first will be poster edges. And when I click on poster edges, you get that cartoon look with the deep texture as if this was hand-drawn. You can experiment with edge thickness, edge intensity, or posterization to get fewer colors or more colors, depending which direction you drag. I usually do this based on my mood that day. Now, to compound this effect and make it look even more cartoon-like, at the bottom of the filter gallery, I'm going to put on a new effect layer. And that simply compounded the poster edges, so it's actually running twice. But I want to use the cutout effect. So now when I hit cutout, there I get a much more cartoon-like image, and now I can experiment with the number of levels, with edge simplicity. To get more detail on her face, I'll dial that down. With edge fidelity, and each of these are working together. So once I get these where I like it, I could come back to poster edges and start playing a bit more with edge thickness to get more details back in the mouth, or edge intensity. And I think I'm happy with it here. So when I click OK, now you have a cartoon avatar that you can crop and set to the appropriate size to use as your headshot. Now, I wouldn't be finished without showing you another trick to make this look like a comic book. I'm going to grab a headshot of me, which has clearly been retouched because everybody knows I work on Photoshop or teach Photoshop, and this technique will give me a comic book look that I could then hand paint in. So I'm going to start by taking the Kelly layer and duplicating it by dragging to the new layer icon. I will then name this Kelly Inverted, and I'm going to do Image, Adjustments, Invert. And this will look kind of crazy, like a negative to begin with, but through the layer blending mode, I could turn on Color Dodge, which actually dodges out the darkest areas. Now you're not seeing much here, and depending on how much work you do, this may look a little bit different, and depending on what shot you start with, it may look different. But now we're going to turn what you almost can't see into outlines. I'm again going to do Filter, Convert for Smart Filters, so I can edit the Gaussian blur I'm going to apply next. And when I do Filter, Convert for Smart Filters, it flattened the layer mask that I had cut out, and now you could see a little bit more of the textures. My eyelashes, the tip of my nose, my mouth, the jawline, and the hair. Then I'll choose Filter, Blur, Gaussian Blur. And I'm just going to type in 7. This is a little recipe that I've developed that will help you get that cartoon outline. And this is interesting in and of itself. It's almost like a fluorescent pencil has drawn it. But here's my last step. I'll use a threshold adjustment layer. And even though I've been using this for a long time, I don't remember exactly where all the icons are, so I just mouse over until I get to threshold. Threshold creates more posterization, so you get those sharp black outlines. And as I drag threshold to the right, everything that's below a certain color level is forced to solid white. Everything above a certain color level is forced to solid black. So I can decide how much of my cheek or nose I want to include. That's looking a little too busy to me, so I'll dial that back down so I just capture a portion of my features. And there we have a cartoon cutout, like you would see in a comic book. And to finish it off, I could make a new layer called Paint, or I could start with the cheeks, and I could begin to paint in each piece. I'm going to go to my paintbrush tool, and I'll sample a yellowish skin tone. I'm pretty naturally pale. And then I'll paint in on the cheeks layer, or in fact, I think I'll name this skin. I'll paint in my face. I could even open the original shot or sample from the original shot. If I hide everything and show that one, I could go to my eyedropper tool and sample a spot from my skin tone to see it really is quite pink. Then I could Option click or Alt click to turn all the other layers back on, click back on skin, and go to my brush tool and just begin to paint this in. So you'd paint in each layer in pieces, and I'm going to make this very rough and pause the video and do different colors of texture. But just to let you know that I'm going too far, but I won't lose my outlines. If I choose Layer Blending Mode, Multiply, it burns that in with the underlying layers, so now I get more of the pink just on my skin. And I can begin coloring top layers to get more shading and more textures. So I'm going to pause the video now and then resume it once I've finished painting this a bit more. Alright, and magically we're back. If I double-click on Adjustments and double-click on Color, you could see I added a separate layer for the teeth, the hair, the dress, the mouth. I even used on the skin layer my brush tool with a 10 or 20% opacity on white to do some shading. But I really wanted a very stark drawing. And in the layers, on the eye whites and on the teeth, I use a Layer Blending Mode Color Dodge, which only lightens the lightest parts of the image. So if I go to Normal, you could see one big giant paint there. But if I go to Color Dodge, it preserves the blacks and just fills white where it's needed. The same thing on the eye whites. But for every other layer, I used the blending mode of Multiply, so it burns the black outlines in with my painting. And there we have it, my own hand-painted avatar that we achieved by using layer blending modes, smart filters, and an adjustment layer.